Hello, good morning. Okay, this is Wednesday. Okay, this is Wednesday. Today's Wednesday. Okay, let's continue reading this book for about a secret agreement to get the US into war. Get the US into war as the presidential election neared for Wilson's second term. Colonel House entered into a series of confidential talks with Sir William Wiseman, who was attached to the British Embassy in Washington, and who acted as a secret intermediary between House and the British Foreign Office. Charlie Seymour writes, between House and Wiseman, there were soon to be few political secrets. This was upsetting to the Secretary of State, William Jennings Bryan. This was upsetting to Mrs. Bryan, a co-author of her husband's memory, writes, when Secretary Bryan was bearing the heavy responsibility of the Department of State, there arose the curious conditions surrounding Mr. E.M. House's unofficial connection with the President and his voyage. His voyage abroad on affairs of state, which were not communicated to Secretary Bryan. The President was unofficially dealing with foreign governments. What was the purpose of those dealings? It was nothing less than to work out the meanings whereby the United States could be brought into the war. Merrick explains. 10 months before the election, which returned Wilson to the White House in 1916 because he kept us out of war, Clone House negotiated a secret agreement with England and France on behalf of Wilson, which pledged the United States to intervene on behalf of the Allies, 注意在前边 ally, allies on March 9, 1916, Woodrow Wilson formally sanctioned the undertaking. If an inkling of the conversations between Colonial House and the leaders of England and France had reached the American people before the election, it might have caused incalculable revulsion of public opinion. Revulsion of public opinion. From this conversation and the various conferences with Sir Edward grew the secret treaty made without the knowledge and content of the United States Senate, by which Woodrow Wilson and House chained the United States to the carryout of intent, 双龙战区 of the intent. After the war, the text of the agreement leaked out. Gray was the first to tackle. Page discussed it at length. Cloning House tells this history. C. Hartley Grant discusses it at length in his book Why We Fought. But for some incomprehensible reason, the enormous significance of the revelation never penetrated the consciousness of the American people. 帮我，您是我的英语老师，帮我翻译一下，谢谢。有一个拴在了战车上，战后标注一下翻译细节。From the conversation and various countries with certain groups. And without knowledge and content. Without the knowledge and content of the United States. By which Wilson has changed the United States to the chair of the engine. After war, the text of the agreement leaked out. Gray was the first to tackle. Page discussed it at length. Cloning House tells its history, discussed it at length in his book Why We Fought. But for some inconsistency in the significance of the revelation. In the significance of the revelation. Revelation never penetrated the consciousness. 从未渗透到 never penetrated the consciousness. Okay. The basic terms of the agreement were that the United States government would offer to negotiate a peaceful settlement between Germany, fund alliance and would then put forth a specific proposal for the terms of that settlement. If either side refused to accept the proposal, then the United States would come into the war as an ally of the other side. The catch was that the terms of the proposal were carefully drafted so that Germany could not possibly accept them. Thus, to the world, it would look as though Germany was at fault and the United States was humanitarian as ambassador, ambassador, um, ambassador, 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 Page observed in a memorandum dated February. How's it read from Berlin Harvard Perry, full of the idea of American intervention. First, his plan was that he and I and a group of the British cabinet should at once work out a minimum program of peace. That is, that the Allies would accept, which he assumed would be unacceptable to the Germans, and that the President would take this program and present it to both sides. The side that declined would be responsible for continuing the war. Of course, the fatal moral weakness of the foregoing scheme is that we should plunge into the war not on the merits of the cause, but by a carefully sprung trick. Of course, the fatal moral 不是因为事业的正当性，而是一个精神。Of course, fatal moral weakness of the foreign scheme. The fatal moral, the fatal, the fatal, the fatal, the fatal，我的妈呀，the fatal，the fatal moral，道德上的致命的道德弱点，the fatal moral weakness of the foregoing scheme，前述 scheme is that we should plunge into the war. Plunge, plunge into the war. Not to the metric of the course. Merit, merit, merit. Not the merit of the course, but by carefully sprung trick. Carefully sprung, 精心布置的 carefully sprung. 触发 sprung. trick. On the surface, it is a paradox that Wilson, who had always been a pacifist 和爱好和平主义者 pacifist, should now enter into a secret agreement with foreign powers to involve the United States in a war which she could easily avoid. The key that unlocks this mystery is the fact that Wilson was also an internationalist. One of the strongest bonds between House and himself was their common dream of a world government. They both recognized that the American people would never accept such a concept unless they were extenuating extenuating circumstance. They reasoned that a long and bloody war was probably the only event that could condition the American mind to accept the laws of national sovereignty, especially if it were packaged with the promise of putting an end to all wars in the future. Wilson knew also that if the United States came into the war early enough to make a real difference on the battlefield, and if large amounts of American dollars could be loaned to the Allied powers, he would be in a position after the war to dictate the terms of the peace. He wrote to Cologne House, England and France have not the same views with regard to peace as we have by any means. When the war is over, we can force them to our way of thinking, because by that time they will, among other things, be financially in our hands. And so Wilson tolerated the acknowledged of mixed emotions as he plotted for war as a necessary evil to bring about what he perceived as the ultimate good of world government. And so Wilson tolerated the agony,忍受着，允许的 would not tolerate, tolerate, to, tolerate the agony, or mixed emotions, and he plotted for war. Plotted for war. Plot. As a necessary evil. As a necessary evil to bring about what he perceived as the ultimate good of the government. Ultimate good of world government. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. With the arrival of 1917, the president was planting hints of both war and the world government in almost every public utterance. In a typical statement made in March of that year, he said, "The tragic events of the third month of vital turmoil through which we have just passed have made us citizens of the world. There can be no turning back. Our own fortunes as a nation are involved, whether we would have it so or not."几乎每一次公开 President was planting his hints of both war and work in almost every public utterance. 我们刚刚经历了30个月充满动荡变动事件，使我们成为世界公民，无法回头。作为一个国家，我的命已经卷入其中，无分我是。No turn back. Our own fortunes as a nation are involved. 作为国家，我们的命运 the nation is involved, whether we would have it so or not. Have it so or not. Said the tragic events of the 30 months of vital turns through which we have just passed have made us citizens of the world. Planting hints. Planting hints. On both war and work in almost every public utterance. 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 In a typical statement made in March of that year, he said, "The tragic events of the 30 months of vital turns through which we have just passed vital turmoil, 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 our own fortunes and nation, fortune, It was about this same time that Wilson called together the Democratic leaders of Congress to a special breakfast meeting at the White House. He told them that, in spite of public sentiment there were public sentiment. There were many sound reasons for the country to enter the war, and he asked them to help him sell this plan to Congress and the voters. Ernest Berry tells us these men were opposite to war, and hence rejected his proposals somewhat heatedly. Wilson knew that it was a poor attempt to split the party just before an election. It was a poor time to split the party just before an election. So he dropped the matter at once, and with course mapped out a pacifist platform for the coming campaign. Governor Martin Glynn of New York and Senator Oliver James Kennedy were sent to the centralized convention. This convention to make keynote speeches, which were based on the slogan, "He kept us out of war," because it had been inaugurated a second time. Inaugurated 就是inaugurate a second time. The Germans played it directly into his hands by announcing the resumption of submarine warfare. It was fortunate for Britain and the bankers that the Germans made this timely blunder, as Great Britain had overdrawn her American credits by some and the bankers were having trouble in floating more large private loans. It was necessary now to pass on the burden of financing to entities to the Federal Treasury. 这些反对的人因此有些激烈的拒绝了他的提议。These men were opposite to the war, and hence reject his proposal somewhat heatedly. Wilson knew that it was a poor attempt to split the party just before an election, so he dropped the matter at once. 他立即放弃这个想法。And with Corning mapped out a pacifist platform for the coming campaign. Gordon Martin of New York and St. Oliver Kenneth were sent to St. Louis convention to make keynote speeches, which were based on the slogan "He kept us out of war." For he had been inaugurated a second time, inaugurated, inaugurated, inaug, inaugurated a second time. The Germans played directly into his hands by announcing the inception of submarine warfare. 对于英国银行家来说，犯下了这个及时的错误是运气。It was fortunate for British and brokers that Germans made this timely blunder, as Great Britain had overdrawn her American credit by some, and brokers were having trouble in floating more large private loans. It was necessary now to pass on the burden of the financial to the federal charity. 因为英国已经透支了这么多，银行家们正在筹集更多大型私人贷款时遇到的困难。现在有必要将资助协约国的负担转嫁给联邦财政部。Fortunately for British bankers that the Germans made this timely blunder. As Great Britain had overdrawn her American credit by some, and the bankers were trouble in floating more large private loans. It was necessary not to pass the burden of financing to Entente to the federal charity. 什么意思？德国人犯了这个事情。德国人犯的这个错误是什么意思？无限制潜艇战决定对其认为的中立国家也进行攻击。哦，这真的是对英国封锁德国的回应，但直接威胁了美国的海洋，惊动了美国公众。在德国潜艇战的人人都有大幅下降。Starting war to the American people, OK， 德国人也是帮忙啊。Through secret agreements and trickery, America have been committed to war. But the political and military scientists realize that something still to be done to change public sentiment. sentiment, public sentiment, public sentiment, public sentiment, public sentiment. How could that be accomplished? Wall Street control over important segments of the media. Wall Street control over important segments of the media was considerable. George Wells tells us around this time the Morgan firm was choosing the top executives for the old and troubled Hamber and Brothers publishing house. In the newspaper field, Pierpont Morgan, at this period, was in effective control of New York Sun, the Boston News Bureau, Finance Magazine, and the Wall Street Journal. On February, Representative Calloway from Texas took the floor of Congress and provided further insight. He said, in March, the J.P. Morgan interests, the steel, shipbuilding, and powder interests and their subsidiary organizations got together 12 men high up in the newspaper world and employed them to select the most influential newspapers in the United States and a sufficient number of them to control generally the policy of the daily press. They found it was only necessary to purchase the control of two greatest papers, and agreement was reached. The policy of the papers was bought to be paid for by the month. An editor was furnished for each paper to properly supervise and add the information regarding the questions of preparedness, militarism, financial policies, and other things of national and international nature considered vital to the interests of the purchasers. 哎呀，开始控制舆论了啊 ！Public sentiment, interest still 照传火药 shipbuilding and powder interests and their subsidiary organizations got together. 12 men high up in the newspaper world and employed them to select the most influential newspapers in the United States and the sufficient numbers of them to control generally the places of the daily press. 召集了报局的12支高层人士，雇佣他们来挑选美国最具影响力的报纸，并确保数量足够以大致控制日报的方针。 newspapers in the States and sufficient number of them to control generally the policy of daily price. Policy, policy of they found it was only necessary to purchase the control of the newspapers. Agreement was reached. The policy of the papers was bought. To be paid by the month. An editor was furnished for each paper to properly supervise and edit the information regarding the question of the preparedness, militarism, financial policies, and other things of national nature considered vital to the interest of the purchasers.哇，开始控制媒体了。Charles Mellon of the New Highland Railroad testified before Congress that his Morgan-owned railroad had more than 1,000 New England newspapers on the payroll, costing about annually. The railroad was also held almost $500,000 in bonds issued by the Boston Herald. This web of control was multiplied by hundreds of additional companies, which also were controlled by Morgan and other investment banking houses. In addition, the Morgan Trust exercised media control by its power of advertising, writing in Arkansas. More advertising is controlled by Morgan Johnson than by any single financial group factor, which immediately gives the banking house the respectful attention of all alert independent publishers who can control over the media at that time. It's well documented, but he was by no means alone in this. During hearings held by Senate Privilege and the Elections Committee, it was revealed that representative from Pennsylvania was acting as a funnel of Rockefeller money to various cooperative congressmen. A letter was introduced to the committee written by Sibley Oxley, the man at Russia's Standard Oil Company who provided the money. In that letter, Sibley said an efficient library bureau is needed, not for a day of crisis, but a permanent, healthy control of the Associated Press and can-read avenues. That will cost money, but will be the cheapest in the end. 我天哪！ The media at that time is well documented. 但他绝非独自为之。凭着经验研究，充当了个份资金，向各个委员渠道收到一份来自提供文的信息。我们需要一个高效的文宣机构，不只是为一天或者一场为例，而是对美联设计类似进行永久健康的控制，这需要缓解。但从长远来看，Morgan control over the media, Morgan control over the media at that time is well documented. But he was he was by means he was by no means alone in this. By no means, Jeffrey, by no means. During the hearing held by the Center Privilege of Election Commission, Center Privileges 参议院特权和选举举行的。Let's not reveal that representative representative 议员 was acting as Fernal for Rockefeller money to various cooperative congressmen. A letter was introduced to the committee written by Matt Roosevelt Standard Oil Company, who provides the money. 收到一封来自 letter so said an efficient library literally bureau is needed. An efficient library An efficient literary bureau is needed. Not for a day or crisis, but the permanent health control of Associated Press and Candle Avenue. Of Associated Press and Candle Avenue and Conrad Avenues. It will cost money, but will be the cheapest in the end. 天哪 Lundberg comments further. So far as can be learned, the Rockefellers have given up their old policy of owning newspapers and magazines outright, relying now upon the publication of all camps to serve their best interests in return for the vast volume of petroleum and allied advertising under Rockefeller control. After the J.P. Morgan block, the Rockefellers have the most advertising of any group of disposed of, and when advertising alone is not sufficient to ensure the fairness of newspaper, the Rockefeller companies have been known to make direct payments in return for a friendly editorial attitude. So far as can be learned, the Rockefeller have given up their old policies of owning newspapers and magazines outright, relying now upon the publications of campaigns to serve their best interests in return for the vast volumes of petroleum and aligned advertising under Rockefeller's control. 放弃了他们过去直接拥有报纸和杂志的策略，现在依靠各派别的出版物来服务他们的最大利益，以换取控制下的大量石油及相关广告业务。在 JP Morgan 集团之后 ，After JP Morgan block, Rockefeller have the most advertising of any group of deposits. 很高广告不足以确保这家报纸会直接付款，以换取较好的经济态度。So far as can be learned, the Rockefellers have given up their old policy of owning newspapers outright. Relying now upon the publications of all camps of serve their best interests. Upon the publics of all camps. The publications. In return for the vast volume of petroleum and line advertising under Rockefeller control. After the JP Morgan block, Rockefeller have the most advertising of any group to disposal. Dispose. And when advertising alone is not sufficient to ensure the of newspaper, Rockefeller companies have been known to make direct payments in return for a friendly editorial attitude. It's not surprising, therefore, that a large part of the nation's press, particularly in the East, began to editorially denounce Germany. Denounce. The cry spread across the land that take up arms against the enemy of West civilization. Editors became eloquent on the patriotic duty of all Americans to defend world democracy, massive preparedness, demonstrations, and parades were organized. Began to editorially denounce government. The cry spread across the land and take up arms against the enemy, eloquent on the patriotic duty of all Americans to defend world democracy, massive preparedness, democrats and presidents are next. Demonstrations and Paris 示威 demonstrate 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 the cry spread across the land to take arms against anyone who Sweden. But it was not enough. Despite of this massive sales campaign, the American people still were not buying. Polls conducted at the time showed popular sentiment continuing to run 10-1 in favor of staying out of Eurozone. Clearly, what was needed was something both drastic and dramatic. Both drastic and drastic to change public opinion. Drastic, dramatic to change public opinion. Organ control over shipping. Oh my goodness！ 我天，这就讲的就是报纸，就是媒体控制，讲了一个媒体控制。254啊，这是一样的，就是花钱买媒体嘛。天哪！全是阴谋论 ，floating 就是全是阴谋。哎呀，真的是控制媒体，说8遍就是控制媒体，啊！就是控制媒体啊！不要说别的，就是控制媒体。Okay, I think that's all for today. Let's continue reading the book tomorrow. See you tomorrow. Bye bye.